On my wedding day, my mother-in-law handed me a document and said, "Sign this, or the wedding is off." My fiancé, Mark, grabbed the paper, tore it up, and said, "Then I have a contract for you too." Her face drained of color when he handed it to her. I knew she was controlling, but I never imagined she'd pull something like this. This was meant to be the happiest day of my life. I'd spent months organizing every detail, flowers, seating arrangements, making sure everything was flawless. Mark and I had been together for 6 years, and after enduring his mother's drama for all that time, I thought I had seen it all. I was wrong. Everything began perfectly. The guests were arriving, the ceremony was about to begin, and I was in the bridal suite with my maid of honor, adjusting my veil, when the door suddenly swung open. There she was, Mark's mother, in an over-the-top blue gown, clearly designed to steal the spotlight. She held a folder in one hand and a pen in the other. Without a word of congratulations, she marched up to me, thrust the folder into my hands, and said, "Sign this, or the wedding is off." I stood there, stunned, unable to speak. My maid of honor looked equally shocked. I finally found my voice and asked, "What is this?" She crossed her arms. "A prenuptial agreement. It's to protect my son. You're signing it right now, or there's no wedding." I wasn't against prenuptial agreements, actually. I believed in them, but Mark and I had never discussed it. And now, on the morning of our wedding, to have it forced on me like this made me sick. I opened the folder with trembling hands and began reading. The terms were outrageous. If we divorced, I would get nothing, no share of what we had built together. The conditions were even worse. Any money I earned during our marriage would be considered household income and managed by Mark's family. If we had children, his mother would have full access to them, whenever she wanted. I could never deny her entry to our home. And the worst part, if Mark ever wanted a divorce, I would have to leave the house, take only what I came with, and never ask for alimony. It was so absurd, I couldn't help but laugh. "You're kidding, right?" I asked, looking up at her. She was dead serious. "I'm not joking, sign it." Just then, the door opened again, and Mark walked in. He looked from his mother to the folder in my hands, his expression darkening. "What's going on?" His mother's voice was sickeningly sweet. "Oh, nothing, dear, just a little formality to protect you." She was just about to sign. Mark walked over, took the folder from my hands, and skimmed the pages. His face turned bright red with every line he read. Without hesitation, he tore the document in half, then he tore it again, and again. His mother gasped, as if he had just committed a grave crime. "Mark, what are you doing?" His voice was calm but firm. "I'm not marrying a contract, Mom, I'm marrying her." He turned to me and said, "I'm so sorry." His mother was furious. "Fine, if she won't sign, then there's no wedding." Then, to my surprise, Mark reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out another folder. He handed it to his mother with a cold look and said, "Then I have a contract for you too." Her face turned ashen as she hesitantly opened the folder. I had no idea what was inside, but the effect was immediate. She froze, her eyes darting across the pages in shock. She quickly closed the folder, clutching it to her chest. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. Mark crossed his arms. "It doesn't matter. What matters is that if you don't walk out of this room right now and let us get married in peace, every single one of those documents will be made public." For the first time, I saw true fear in her eyes. She stood there, staring at Mark, probably searching for any sign that he was bluffing, but he wasn't. Without another word, she turned and stormed out of the room, clutching the folder. I turned to Mark, still in shock. "What was in that contract?" He ran a hand through his hair and exhaled, "Leverage." My maid of honor nervously laughed. That was some serious drama. But drama didn't even begin to cover it. Still, I had no idea what was in that folder. So, just before we walked down the aisle, I asked him again, what was in it? He met my gaze and said, "Everything she never wanted anyone to know." And that was just the beginning. The ceremony went on without a hitch. We said our vows, exchanged rings, and for a moment, I thought we had won. Mark had stood up to his mother, she had backed down, and we were finally married. But when we entered the reception, I knew something wasn't right. There she was, sitting at the front table like she was in charge, a glass of champagne in her hand. The moment she saw us, her eyes locked onto us. I squeezed Mark's hand. "Why is she still here?" I whispered. Mark let out a deep breath. "She wasn't invited to the reception, but there she is." I didn't want her to ruin our night, so I forced a smile, greeted guests, and tried to focus on enjoying the moment. But I had a feeling she wasn't finished, and I was right. The first sign came at dinner. The servers brought out the food we had carefully chosen, except it wasn't what we had ordered. Mark and I exchanged confused glances. The plates were filled with something completely different. I leaned over to our wedding planner. What happened to the filet mignon and salmon? Her face drained of color. I don't know. Let me find out. A few minutes later, she returned looking mortified. The caterer said the groom's mother made last-minute changes. She told them she was in charge. Mark slammed his fork down. Of course she did. I took a deep breath. It's just food. No big deal. But then came the second blow, the speech. During the toasts, my maid of honor gave a heartfelt and beautiful speech that had me tearing up. Then Mark's best man spoke, making everyone laugh. Then, before the DJ could continue, Mark's mother stood up and grabbed the microphone. "Oh no," I muttered. The room went silent. She smiled sweetly, her voice dripping with insincerity. "Since I'm the mother of the groom, I think it's only fair I say a few words." Mark muttered under his breath, "Sit down, Mom." But she ignored him, launching into a speech that was anything but kind. She spent the first 2 minutes talking about how she never thought Mark would settle down because he was so successful and had so many choices. Then, she turned to me. "But I guess some women know how to be persistent." A few guests laughed awkwardly, not realizing the insult. I clenched my fists under the table. Then, she made her real point. "When Mark first told me about the engagement, I was shocked. Marriage is a huge commitment, and some people rush into it without thinking," she said, turning to me. "That's why I did what any loving mother would do. I tried to protect him, but he made his choice." She sighed dramatically. "So now, all I can do is pray." The room fell completely silent. Mark shot to his feet, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. "That's enough." She blinked innocently. "Oh honey, I was just joking." Mark grabbed the mic from her hand. "We talked about this. You weren't even supposed to be here." Her eyes widened. "Are you saying I'm not welcome at my own son's wedding?" "That's exactly what I'm saying." She placed her hand dramatically over her chest as if she were deeply insulted, but Mark didn't play into her theatrics. "Go home, Mom," he ordered. She looked at him, then slowly turned her gaze toward me. The chill in her eyes was palpable. Without another word, she stormed out. I thought we were done with her, but it was just the beginning. The honeymoon was perfect. Mark and I focused solely on each other and didn't let his mother's drama cloud our peace. For 10 glorious days, everything felt calm, but when we returned home, all hell broke loose. We walked into our apartment to find it half empty, furniture, electronics, personal belongings, gone. At first, I thought we had been robbed, but then I saw the note on the kitchen counter. "Since you refused to sign a fair contract, I am simply ensuring my son is protected. He will thank me later, your mother-in-law." I felt a wave of rage wash over me. Mark was furious. He immediately called her. As soon as she picked up, he yelled, "What the hell did you do?" "Oh, calm down, dear. I simply took what was rightfully his." "You stole from us," Mark shouted. "I protected you," she replied coolly. Mark hung up on her and called the police. When they arrived, they informed us that, since she still had a key to the apartment, one she had kept after we moved in, it would be considered a civil matter, not a break-in. My rage only intensified. This was calculated. She had planned it. But she didn't know that Mark and I had already been preparing for this moment. Remember that folder he handed her on our wedding day? The one that made her face drain of color? It contained everything she had done over the years: fraud, tax evasion, secret bank accounts, and, most damning of all, evidence that she had forged Mark's signature on a loan in his name. We'd been quietly collecting evidence for months, waiting for the right moment to strike. And now, thanks to her actions, we had the perfect excuse. Mark gave her one last chance: return everything you stole, apologize, and stay out of our lives, or I'll take everything to the authorities. She laughed, actually laughed. "You wouldn't dare." Mark's reply was calm but cold: "Watch me." And that's exactly what he did. I thought we'd finally trapped her. I thought this nightmare was coming to a close, but I was wrong. Mark went to the authorities, armed with the proof: fraud, tax evasion, and the forged loan. We expected her to panic or maybe try to negotiate, but instead, she vanished. She disappeared. Mark's calls went unanswered. No texts, no emails. It was as if she had evaporated from the face of the earth. A week later, we discovered why. Mark's father called, his voice strained. "I need to see you now." We met him at a diner, and he slid a folder across the table. "You need to see this." Mark opened the folder. his face growing darker with every page. It was all there: bank withdrawals, property transfers, and asset sales. She had drained their joint accounts, sold off property, and disappeared with everything. His father's voice trembled. She left a note saying she was starting fresh. I felt a deep sinking in my stomach. She knew she was caught, and instead of facing the consequences, she ran. But then, the real shock came. Strange things started happening. Rumors about my credentials spread at work. Mark received anonymous tips accusing him of embezzling funds. And then, packages started arriving at our apartment, filled with bizarre items, expired food, old shoes, and even a box of dead flowers. It quickly became clear, she wasn't just running, she was seeking revenge. One night, Mark and I came home late. As soon as we stepped inside, something felt off. The air had a strange tension, and everything appeared in its place. Except for one detail, I found a note on my pillow. It read, "I will always be one step ahead of you." I screamed. Mark rushed to my side, saw the note, and immediately began checking the apartment. The locks were intact, and the windows were shut, but we realized she still had a key. The next morning, we changed the locks, installed security cameras, and filed another police report, but because she hadn't stolen anything or broken in, there was little they could do. But we weren't going to let her win. If she wanted a war, we were done playing defense. Mark and I spent weeks scouring through financial records and property deeds, looking for any clue as to where she had gone, and one night, we found it. She had bought a small house in another state, using a fake name. She thought she'd covered her tracks, except for one mistake. She had used Mark's stolen identity to secure part of the financing. That was all we needed. We contacted authorities in her new state, provided them with everything: the fraud, the false identity, and the financial crimes. Then, we waited. A month later, the call came. Mark's mother had been arrested at her new home. Completely blindsided, she was caught off guard. The woman who had spent her life manipulating others had finally lost control. She called Mark from jail, sobbing, "How could you do this to your own mother?" Mark's reply, "I'm just protecting myself. Isn't that what you always wanted?" Then he hung up. Even after her arrest, I didn't feel a sense of peace. Mark's mother had always been a force of chaos, and I kept expecting her to slip through the cracks somehow. But this time, she had gone too far. There were too many people ensuring she couldn't get away with it. We attended every single court hearing. She showed up looking frail, her hair limp and her expensive clothes replaced by cheap substitutes. But her eyes, those eyes, still held that cold, calculating look. She refused to even glance at us. Her lawyer threw everything at the wall, claiming stress, a misunderstanding, even trying the "poor abandoned mother" card. But the evidence was too overwhelming. The judge saw through her charade. She was sentenced to 6 years in prison for identity theft, fraud, and forgery. When the sentence was read, she finally locked eyes with Mark. I'll never forget what she said: "This is your fault." Not an apology, not a regret, just blame. Mark didn't say a word. He just watched as she was let out in handcuffs. That was the last time we saw her. And just when we thought the battle was over, there was one last move to make. While she was in prison, Mark and I worked with a lawyer to ensure she'd never have any influence over us again. We legally blocked her from accessing our finances, obtained a permanent restraining order, and, most importantly, Mark legally changed his last name. She could no longer claim him as her son. It was symbolic, yes, but it was also the final slap in her face. She had spent her life trying to control him, to make sure he would always belong to her. Now, he was free. After everything, silence settled over our lives. No more phone calls, no more manipulative guilt trips. We could finally live without fear. Mark's father, freed from her control, began traveling the world. He even found love again, a kind, wonderful woman who treated him like family. As for Mark and me, we built a life that was our own, one free from the chaos she had caused. Years later, Mark received a letter from a prison in another state. Without even opening it, he tossed it into the fireplace. Then, he looked at me, smiled, and said, "Some contracts aren't worth reading." And that was the end of it, for good. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Stay stunned.